A dull, throbbing pain pulsed through Lucas's skull, his thoughts sluggish as he drifted toward consciousness. His body felt strange, suspended, stretched. A thick haze clouded his senses, and for a long moment he couldn't distinguish up from down. His lungs burned slightly, and as he inhaled, the stench of rot and damp fur filled his nose, forcing his mind into sudden, sharp clarity. The blood rushing to his head made his vision blur, but instinct told him something was terribly wrong. He tried to move, only to find his feet bound tightly above him, his entire body hanging upside down. His wrists dangled freely, but a coarse, sinewy restraint bound his ankles together, secured to the jagged ceiling of a cavern. Cold air brushed his exposed skin, and the longer he remained still, the more his body ached from the unnatural position. Panic threatened to take hold, but he gritted his teeth and forced himself to breathe evenly. He had no idea how long he had been unconscious. Slowly he opened his eyes. The cavern around him was shrouded in dimness, only illuminated by the eerie glow of pale fungi clinging to the damp stone walls. His vision adjusted to the dark, revealing scattered bones littering the uneven ground below him, some broken, some half buried in the dirt, others stripped clean of flesh. He swallowed hard, forcing down the bile that threatened to rise in his throat. The only sound was the slow, rhythmic dripping of water somewhere in the distance. But even without sight, he felt the presence near him. Lucas turned his head slightly, shifting his gaze to the far side of the cave. It was there. The beast sat in the shadows, its hulking form partially obscured by jagged stone pillars. Its massive frame was relaxed but poised, its head lowered, glowing eyes fixed unblinkingly on him. It didn't move, didn't growl, only watched, waiting. Lucas tensed, the weight of that gaze pressing down on him like a physical force. The creature's patience unsettled him more than if it had attacked outright. It wasn't acting out of blind rage or mindless hunger. It was calculating. He exhaled slowly, forcing his mind into order. No sudden movements, no wasted energy. He tested the restraints around his ankles, flexing his legs slightly. The bindings were thick, organic, almost tendon-like. Twisting his body, he felt the fibers stretch but not break. If he jerked too hard, the beast would react. Instead, he closed his eyes and reached outward with his mind. The telepathic connection wasn't precise, more like wading through thick, murky water. The beast's thoughts weren't structured like a human's, but they weren't mindless either. They were sharp, layered, an intricate web of instinct, strategy, and memory. There was an intelligence there, not human, but deeply aware. Hunger and dominance simmered beneath the surface, but so did something else. Recognition. Not of him as an individual, but as a force, a rival. Lucas pushed deeper, bracing against the chaotic swirl of thoughts. The beast was testing him, but not just for survival. It was assessing him, comparing him to something else, something it had encountered before. A flicker of an image, half-formed, swam through its mind, a figure wreathed in flame. Power. A memory, ancient and distorted. This wasn't just about food. It was about something more. Lucas carefully withdrew from the connection, taking stock of his situation. His arms were free, but without momentum, he couldn't reach the bindings around his feet. His relic, still attached to his wrist, remained dormant, its power sluggish after the strain of his last battle. He could still feel the warmth of his pyrokinesis within him, but the confined space and his own vulnerable position made fire a dangerous gamble. Escape wasn't impossible, but it required patience. The beast shifted, muscles rolling beneath its thick fur, but it still didn't lunge. Its ears flicked at the faint sounds in the cavern, dripping water, the distant shuffle of unseen creatures. It wasn't just watching him. It was waiting for something. Lucas's pulse quickened. It's testing me. A slow, dawning realization settled over him. The beast wasn't just keeping him alive for sport. It was gauging him, measuring his reactions, seeing if he was worth something. What, he didn't know. His jaw clenched. He wouldn't wait around to find out. He adjusted his weight slightly, shifting his center of gravity as he prepared to move. His body had begun to go numb from the position, but he still had control of his arms. He reached upward as carefully as he could, fingers grazing the thick fibers around his ankles. He could feel the coarse strands, slightly damp, taut against the ceiling. If he could weaken them just enough... The beast's head twitched. Lucas froze. Its nostrils flared, and for the first time, it bared its fangs slightly, Not in a snarl, but in something closer to understanding. The watching silence was over. Lucas barely had a second to react. With terrifying speed, the beast moved. It lunged forward, its massive frame covering the distance between them in an instant. Lucas twisted, swinging his body to the side just as the beast's claws slashed through the air where he had been hanging. The force of its strike sent dust and debris scattering, and Lucas felt the bindings at his ankles strain but hold. His heart pounded. The beast let out a low, guttural exhale, stepping back, studying his reaction. It was still testing him. Lucas steadied his breathing. If it wanted to see what he could do, he'd give it something to think about. This time, he moved deliberately. He reached out with his telekinesis, not to break free, but to disrupt the air around him, to create an illusion of movement. A whisper of motion in the cavern, subtle and just out of reach. The beast's ears twitched. Then, just as the creature turned its head slightly toward the false signal, Lucas struck. A sharp telekinetic pulse lashed out, slicing through the bindings with just enough force to loosen them. He dropped several feet before catching himself midair, twisting his body to land with as much control as possible. His boots hit the cavern floor. The beast let out a rumbling growl, no longer idle. Lucas didn't wait. He dove to the side just as the creature lunged again, claws scraping against the rock where he had stood moments before. The ground trembled from the force of impact. The fight had begun. Lucas landed in a crouch, rolling to absorb the impact. His body screamed in protest, but he forced himself upright, eyes locked on the beast. He could see it now, how it moved, how it adjusted its stance with every shift of his weight. It was watching him the same way he was watching it. His fingers curled, heat flickering beneath his skin. For the first time since awakening, Lucas felt something close to control. The beast may have been testing him, but now it was his turn, and he was going to win. The moment Lucas hit the cavern floor, the beast was already moving. A blur of fur and muscle, it lunged with terrifying speed, closing the distance before he could fully recover from his disoriented landing. He barely had time to twist away, feeling the rush of displaced air as its claws raked the stone where he had stood just a second before. His breath came sharp and fast. He was free of his restraints, but that didn't mean he was safe. The beast was relentless. Every movement a calculated assault designed to corner him. It wasn't attacking blindly, it was hunting, studying, and that was far more dangerous than brute force. Lucas dove to the side as the creature swiped again, rolling across the uneven ground before pushing himself to his feet. His mind raced. Brute force won't work. I can't overpower it. I have to outlast it. Outthink it. The lair was vast but uneven, jagged outcroppings of stone jutting from the ground, remnants of collapsed tunnels and warped terrain from centuries of geological shifts. It was a dangerous place, but that meant it was usable. Lucas turned and ran. The beast thundered after him, its heavy footfalls pounding against the cavern floor. Lucas weaved between sharp, protruding rock formations, keeping his movements unpredictable. He reached out with his telepathy, trying to get a read on its next attack. Hunger. Instinct, hunt, kill. No real thoughts, only primal drive. He couldn't manipulate it, but I can predict it. He darted left, skimming the edge of a deep crevice that split the cavern floor. The beast leapt after him, its sheer size allowing it to clear the gap in a single bound. Lucas barely managed to roll under another swipe, sliding down a sloped section of the cave as claws raked the stone just inches above his head. Too close. Lucas scrambled up, pushing his legs harder. His lungs burned, and sweat slicked his palms despite the cold. The beast was forcing him into tighter spaces, adjusting its movements to match his speed. It was adapting. His heartbeat slammed against his ribs. This isn't just a monster. It's learning from me. A deep growl rumbled behind him. Then the beast lunged, not for him, but ahead of him. It cut me off. Lucas skidded to a stop, his boots scraping against loose gravel. The beast stood between him and the open cavern, blocking his escape. It exhaled heavily, its massive form radiating heat in the frigid air. Lucas clenched his jaw. He'd been herded. His mind raced. I can't keep dodging forever. He needed a shift in tactics. He needed a distraction, an opening. He reached out again, but telepathy was useless against an enemy this primal. What about illusions? It wouldn't trick the beast, but it might throw it off for a second. Lucas focused. sending phantom footsteps echoing behind the creature. A distraction. The beast's ears flicked toward the sound. That was his moment. Lucas threw himself sideways, using telekinesis to propel his movement faster than his body could manage on its own. He barely cleared the creature's reach, feeling the rush of wind as its claws slashed through the space where he had just been. He hit the ground hard, rolling through the impact and scrambling forward. He needed higher ground. Now. Lucas climbed, vaulting onto an elevated rock formation. The beast followed immediately, leaping onto the ledge with unnatural ease. Lucas didn't stop. He scaled higher, jumping from one precarious ledge to another, forcing the fight to a vertical battlefield. The beast hesitated. It was too large to maneuver the way he could. That's it. Slow it down. Make it work for every inch. Lucas leapt again, reaching the highest point in the cavern. The beast snarled below, muscles tensing for a jump. No, not just a jump. A charge. Lucas's eyes flicked past the creature, scanning the environment. That's when he saw it. The unstable wall. A large section of stone at the edge of the cavern, riddled with fractures and loose rock. If he could force the beast into ramming it full force, Lucas steadied himself, forcing deep, controlled breaths. He had one shot. The beast crouched, preparing to pounce. Lucas feigned hesitation, letting his muscles tense as if he were cornered. He locked eyes with the creature. "Come on, take the bait." The beast roared and launched forward, its full weight surging toward him. Lucas moved at the last possible second, throwing himself off the ledge. The beast slammed into the weakened wall. A deep, guttural crack echoed through the cavern. The rock gave way. Stone and debris rained down, burying the beast beneath a cascade of jagged rubble. Lucas hit the ground hard, rolling through the impact. He turned, breathless, watching as the dust settled. The beast was stunned, trapped beneath a mound of shattered stone. It wouldn't hold for long, but it was enough. Lucas forced himself to his feet. His arms trembled from exhaustion, his vision swimming, his lungs dragging in desperate breaths. His muscles screamed at him to stop. No, not yet. The beast shifted beneath the debris. It wouldn't stay down. Not unless he ended this. Lucas straightened, his fingers curled into fists, and he let his mind sink into the warmth coiling beneath his skin. The fire. The flames inside him burned, eager to be released. He could feel them licking at his veins, pulsing beneath his fingertips. For the first time, he didn't resist them. Lucas embraced the fire. Heat surged through his body, igniting in an instant. Flames roared to life in his palms, casting flickering shadows against the cavern walls. The once dark lair was bathed in the orange glow of his fury. The beast, still trapped beneath the rubble, growled low and deep. Its eyes flickered with something new. Wariness. Caution. Lucas exhaled, rolling his shoulders. He wasn't running anymore. Time to finish this. The cavern pulsed with heat, the air shifting as flames roared to life in Lucas's hands. The fire curled around his fingers like a living thing, crackling with raw, untamed power. His breath was steady, his mind sharp, yet there was an undeniable force rising within him, one that demanded to be let loose. The beast, half buried under rubble, let out a low, guttural growl. Its massive form shuddered as it pushed against the fallen rocks, muscles straining with primal fury. Its glowing eyes locked onto Lucas, and for the first time, they held something new. Caution. Lucas didn't wait. He extended his hand, and with a simple flick of his fingers, a wave of fire surged forward. The flames struck the cavern floor in a brilliant, searing arc, rushing toward the beast like a tidal wave of embers. The creature snarled and sprang to its feet, shaking off the last of the rubble just in time to leap aside, narrowly avoiding the inferno. The fire raged across the cavern, licking at the walls, illuminating the once dark space in violent hues of orange and red. Lucas didn't let up. He turned sharply, his palm outstretched as another jet of fire streaked through the air, cutting across the beast's path. It twisted mid-movement, dodging, but not fast enough. The flames scorched the fur along its flank, and the creature let out a pained, furious roar. The lair's natural dampness kept the flames from spreading uncontrollably, but the heat was undeniable, turning the cavern into an infernal battlefield. Lucas advanced, each step accompanied by a fresh burst of fire. His control had never been this precise, this instinctive. He wasn't just throwing flames wildly, he was shaping them. A controlled flick of his wrist sent a burning arc circling around the beast, cutting off its retreat. Another motion, and a concentrated blast struck the ground near its feet, forcing it to jump back into the narrowing space between the cavern walls. For the first time since the fight began, the beast hesitated. It was smart enough to know fire was different from brute strength, different from telekinesis, from trickery. It had adapted before, but fire couldn't be outmuscled. Lucas's eyes narrowed. "You're afraid of it." He raised both hands, feeling the power coil and burn in his veins. The flames surged higher, flickering with brilliant, shifting intensity. The beast let out another deep snarl, its heavy breath visible in the stifling heat, its claws scraping against the stone floor. Then it lunged. Lucas reacted on instinct, stepping back and twisting his body, sending a pillar of fire straight up between them. The flames roared skyward, forcing the beast to veer to the side at the last second. Lucas pivoted, using the opening to press the attack. A wide, sweeping wave of fire erupted from his outstretched arm, rushing toward the beast like a cascading inferno. The flames slammed to the cavern wall, exploding outward, scattering molten embers through the air. The beast recoiled, skidding to a stop before it could be consumed. Lucas could feel the shift. The advantage was his now. The beast moved differently, no longer the relentless predator, but the cornered prey. Lucas could end this. Now. He took another step forward, his pulse hammering as he raised both hands again. The fire swirled in his grip, curling around his fingers like molten ribbons, waiting, eager. And then the heat hit him. Lucas's breath caught as a wave of blistering air rushed over his skin. Sweat dripped down his forehead, stinging his eyes. The cavern was too hot now, the fire devouring the oxygen, thickening the air with an oppressive, suffocating weight. His grip faltered for half a second. The beast saw it. With a powerful burst of speed, it lunged straight through the flames. Lucas barely managed to react, throwing himself aside just as massive claws sliced through the space where he had stood. He hit the ground hard, rolling as the searing heat of his own fire licked at his side. The beast, wounded but far from defeated, pivoted sharply, eyes locked on him once more. Lucas clenched his fists, forcing himself back up. The fire wasn't a perfect weapon. It gave him an edge, but he wasn't immune to its consequences. The cavern was becoming unstable. The heat was rising too fast. But he wasn't done. The beast charged again. Lucas planted his feet. This time, he didn't dodge. He exhaled sharply, pushing all the fire forward in a concentrated blast. A controlled burst of flames shot straight into the beast's path, colliding with its charging form. The impact sent the creature skidding backward, roaring in pain. Its fur smoldered, its breath labored. It stumbled. Lucas stepped forward, fire still crackling in his hands. "Enough," he said, his voice even, controlled. The beast let out a final shuddering growl. It lunged one last time, but this time, Lucas was ready. He stepped forward, twisting his hands in a controlled motion, forcing every remaining ounce of his fire into a single, searing column. The flames surged, engulfing the beast entirely. The cavern roared with the sound of the creature's final, furious cry before its form collapsed into the inferno. The flames consumed its massive body, reducing it to nothing but smoldering remains. The fire flickered, then faded, leaving behind only the scent of scorched fur and the quiet crackle of dying embers. Lucas let out a slow breath, his hands lowering, his body trembling from the exertion. The cavern was eerily silent. It was over. The beast was dead.